Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Robert Thompson, Principal Architect here at Aki Workshop. And welcome back to webinar number 17 in our Responsible Hillside Living webinar series. So today we want to talk about, we want to discuss affordable hillside living. And I want to kind of outline 10 possible ways you can build more affordably on a hillside. Now, this is very tricky. And, some would ask, why this matters. But um, hillside construction, hillside construction often escalates. The cost of it often escalates really, really fast. And that's usually due to not designing strategically, right? Many homeowners, assume a hillside is going to be expensive, but it's usually not necessarily true. I mean, it all comes down to if your design approach works with the land. And once it does that, you stand a pretty good chance of saving some money on a hillside. So I want to run through 10 kind of tips that I think um, could possibly give you a fighting chance to, build something at or close to your budget. So the first one we're looking at is working with the slope and not against it. I say this all the time in everything I do, right? Once you have a slope site, once you have a hillside project, you get your topographical survey and you determine where's the best place to put a structure where it causes the least amount of disturbance to your site. Now, it's important to understand the strategies in stepping and terracing your land. Some people often want to build a flat house on a hillside, which is which is another thing that drives your cost up because then you tend to do one big chop in the hill, create this massive retaining wall to create a flat site to make things easier, right? But when you work with the hill, then in the long run, you have less problems with mold and less problems with having to manage a retaining wall that's like a part of the structure, right? So the, let the slope tell you where the house wants to sit. That's very important, right? You preserve drainage when you do that. You 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 do less damage to the ecosystem when you do that. Right? So that's number one, working with the slope, not against it. People often find that they could save a fraction of their costs when they look at how the land works and work with it. Smaller retaining walls are possible. Even no retaining walls are possible in some areas. And that takes us to number two, which is limiting retaining structures. Now, again, when you look at building a flat house on a hillside, once you chop the shovel out, which we call it, you're left with this big gaping hole that you then have to retain. And with that retaining wall needs steel, concrete, um, a decent workforce. Um, competent workforce. So, if you can not do that, then you stand a higher chance of spending less. Or you could look at alternatives, right? So you have alternatives like a Gabion basket, which could be used with some amount of modification to how the foundation works. Or you could use mechanically stable soil, which is MSC. Um, that that is a very economical way to retain your land to be able to build. Now, another kind of more economical thing you could look at is also probably integrating your retaining wall with your building. But when you do that, you stand the chance, depending on how it's designed, you stand the chance of having a kind of damp wall if it's not designed properly. So if you have good builders, and let's say we did something like that in our project a few years ago. What we did was we made the floor plan of the building narrow, facing east, so that sun penetrates the building. So no matter what, there's no kind of dark spot in the building, and there's always airflow moving through. So then, you have to use certain strategies in those cases if you're going to integrate your retaining wall. But it is a cheaper option than to cut a shovel and set a building in it, because then you're building, a massive wall for retention plus your walls for your house. Um, so the next one we look at, and after this one, I'd love to hear some questions if you have any already. You could always put it in the chat box. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. Any experience you guys have had, feel free to drop it in the chat box and we'll have a chat about it. So the next one is orienting for access efficiency. Now, the biggest problem on a hillside house, on a hillside project when you're working with a budget, is what to do with the car, right? Because you either have to, build massive retaining walls to create a driveway, or you'll have to make the structure a lot more robust to be able to park on the structure, right? Now, given how given how your slope is, it depends on your slope a lot, how you deal with your car. For instance, we had one situation with a project on the North Coast where there was a ravine that separated a part of the site, and where the house was supposed to be was going to be away from the road. So then the client needed to be malleable, because we had to create a parking structure and then bridge to the house. So if we were to do a driveway to bring the car to the house, then you're looking at, maybe double the cost to get it done. So the driveway design is a structural decision, and it's also a personal decision, of what you're willing to live with. Um, Again, when your budget's tight, you have to be malleable, right? Any questions so far? No? All right, we'll just keep running. So number 4 is to have a simplified structural system. right? So having repetitive bays in your structure keeps things cheaper. You could also look at, being consistent with your rebar lengths. Standard beams are faster. Avoid things like, I know, the fancy cantilevers are a thing, but if you could avoid them, then that would help to make your project a bit more economical. Unless the cantilever is solving a real constraint, then you know I would say stay away from it. So let's say to to be able to sit into the land and not disturb some kind of specific situation at a part of your site, then you could cantilever because that's serving a purpose. Um, but just in general, drama architecture is good, but not if the hillside pays the price. There's a question, what about building?
Yeah, Robert, I was actually asking about building on still something like this.
Right, so building on stilts, that's uh that's a brilliant solution. Um, but sometimes people want to build their stilts all the way up to the road. And then how high that stilt's going to go, and then you end up having to do quite a lot of structure of just stilts. So then you
Okay,
you, you end up putting quite a lot of money under the
into
building.
that. Okay,
Exactly. But stilts could work if you could sit in the site,
great.
right?
Okay. So maybe part of the site on stilts. Just like,
Exactly.
yeah.
So part could be
Okay.
on stilts and part could be exposed. So that's a great
All right.
question. Thanks very much. Um, Number 5. You could use lightweight structure or a hybrid kind of material. So you're looking at, timber, steel, all these things like reduces the load. You create a lighter building, you could have smaller foundations. You could even do something prefab, which saves you a lot of time on a slope. Now, erecting erecting the prefab structure on the slope is another story, but that depends on the site. So that's why the site informs everything you do. So lightweight on top means lightweight below, right? Less concrete, less cost to a degree, right? And then we
Um,
have number. Tell me.
I would be curious to know if anybody is actually planning to build on the hillside right now. If maybe somebody has a question about their specific site, where if it's in Maracas or Blanchisseuse or any of these places. Andrew is asking, what's an example of these materials?
Right. So, I mean, simple materials like wood, steel. Actually, AP Scott has a pre-engineered solution that is quite light, and that could actually work on a hillside in a hybrid um, configuration. So let's say you have part concrete, um, part the solution. Andrew, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Hello. Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's not so
Hi.
much to ask the question. They had asked if anyone would have been possibly building um, on a slope. So
Sure.
my sister and I bought some land in Maracas, St. Joseph, and we were just trying to figure out how, I mean, it's on a slope, and um, a challenge has been figuring out how to build on a slope. We kind of probably want to do like a cottage or something that can be um, like an Airbnb or like a getaway from the
hmm
city. But yeah, so it was
hmm
just kind of to figure out how to build on a slope and maybe to understand what type of lightweight materials exist.
Right.
Yeah, so just
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So what you said, like a cottage is a great thing to build on a slope because that takes us to number 6, which is a compact footprint. right? When you build a compact footprint, you take up less space, so you're not cutting as much. Or let's say if you put this building on stilts, you wouldn't be as high, depending on your slope, right? So I always say keep things very vertical and stacked when you're working on a hillside. You can't do sprawl. Right? On a slope, height costs less than sprawl, right?
Hi,
So,
Robert.
mhm.
Um,
Hello?
Catherine here.
Hi,
Catherine, you hear
Catherine.
me?
Yes.
Hi. Um, Building on the North Coast. You mentioned the prefab on the slopes.
Mhm.
How does that weather up literally to being close to the actual sea blast?
Right. So the well, you'd have to really prepare the steel work. If you're using steel, you have to really treat the steel and then protect it, either have it being encased or have it be, galvanized. So that also adds to your cost. But the cost gets offset with the speed of fabrication. You
Okay.
spend less time in the ground, right? So I think AP Scott's solution has worked very well down the islands.
Okay.
So I
But the
think
sea
that's a
blast, is it as bad on the islands as it is on the North Coast?
yeah, well, I mean, you're right on the water.
Yeah, but like they get seasonal winds and so on, I
Yeah,
know that,
yeah,
and waves, but
yeah.
being direct to everyday blast, like salt
Hmm.
in the air, like,
So when you
what
say
do
the
you think
North
what
Coast,
would be your best solution? What would you
wh-
suggest is the best solution?
when you say North Coast, you talking about Tokaside, Maracaside,
Blanchishes.
Blanchisseuse. Okay. Um, Best solution would be a mix of concrete and timber,
Okay.
right? But then to keep things economical, we need to keep things as modular as we can, right? Does that help?
Yes, a lot, yeah, because I was thinking about timber, but it's just as I think and as I wait, the timber just goes up and up and up in cost.
It does. But everything
Unless
goes up and up in
I
cost.
get some lucky thing where I get something recyclable somewhere to remove and put somewhere else, that kind of thing. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
harvest pieces from here and there because it's possible. You know, like my
yeah.
brother just did over his house, and he had a whole house that I could have. He just literally dismantled. I'm like, I could have taken that with me, but it's not so easy as that.
No, I know,
You
I know.
can't
The longer you wait, everything just goes up and up.
exactly. So
Somebody has a question here. What if the contour is consistent horizontally? Can sprawl be considered if it's working? Yeah, yeah. So in the image, you can see like this is a project we're working on in the North Coast where we have a consistent horizontal slope, and we managed to basically go l- keep it a narrow floor plan, but keep it long, and then also kind of step along with the contour going in that direction. So yes, um, working horizontally, sprawl could work if it's working with the contour horizontally for sure. All right. Now, the next important thing would be your integrating a drainage early. So as you plan, as you're developing your foundations, you're also kind of strategically creating and putting in how you plan to move water away from the building, and also control the speed at which water comes off your site, because that's important for whoever's downslope of you, right? You need to slow the water down so that it's not just rushing off the site into someone else's property. So water from your roof, um, need to look at how you kind of, create tiny catchments as it goes down and goes to your outfall. And that's kind of like the number one failure point on a hillside build, water management. So simple tools are French drains, swales, step drains, and things like that. If you don't plan drainage early, you pay for it forever, right?
Uh,
No, any questions?
Yeah, I had a comment or question on this one. During the site visit that you do you take that drainage into consideration for the client, or when does that come in as an architect? When does that come into your talking with the client about how to plan on the site? Because the client might come with a plan, like, I want my house this way and that way. When do you say, hey, drainage needs to be taken into consideration, so we need to shift a little bit?
Right. So yeah, that's a great question. Somebody will come with what they want already in their heads. But it's important to be able to say, look, we need to see what the site can do first. So once I go to a site, when we do our clarity report, we go to the site, we look at where water is naturally moving. Especially on a hillside, it's easy to tell. And then you kind of then work that into whatever your strategy is. Either you try to keep
Right.
it or you try to create something new, but it's
Okay.
usually more affordable
Cheap,
to
more
keep where
affordable
the
to keep it.
water to keep where the
Right.
water is already going and work with what the land's already doing over hundreds of
Right.
years.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Now another option, I'm not sorry, number 8 is retaining vegetation strategically. Now, what tends to happen, we tend to have small sites, right? Small hillside sites. Not many people have big ones that you have a lot of vegetation on. But so most likely you're gonna be clearing all of it. But what you could do is once you clear and you have a design, you plan the landscaping along with retaining vegetation that you could already start to plan. Once we kind of settle where the extent of what construction will need, you could already start to plant like, vetiver and any other kind of retaining grass to kind of help keep your site intact from all the cutting you'll have to do. And that helps with, just basically naturally retaining. It's the cheapest retaining wall you could have if it's actually growing on your site. So using these root systems to naturally reinforce your site is important on a hillside. And leaving as much vegetation as you can that makes sense is also a really, really good thing to do. All right. Any questions on that?
Right. Are there any type of vegetation that should not be on the sites, like things that you might want to remove for the sake of it
So
not slipping down?
that's a great question. Now, one thing that we learned a few years ago was if you have a mature tree on a steep site and that tree is not vertical,
Mhm.
then you know that tree is not sitting in rock. So you know the rock is not close below your surface. And
Right.
that could actually, eventually fall once you start construction, things start being moved
Right.
around. So then, there's certain trees bigger trees you could take out.
Mhm.
Uh, Bamboo is a nuisance, but it also helps to retain, but it takes up
Yeah,
too much
because I was wondering
space.
about the bamboo, but you had to be cutting it down all the time.
It takes up too much space, but it
Yeah.
does help with soil retention. Um,
Okay.
what else would you remove?
You
If
mentioned
you
vetiver as a plant. Where do people get that? Like, where you just go by the random
um
store and get vetiver?
I, I think there are nurseries around.
The streets? Okay.
Yeah, you could actually ask at any plant shop,
Okay.
and you should be able to get linked to somebody
Who could
who
get it
sells
set up.
it.
And
And
as the go ahead.
mhm. It's important how it's planted. So if you're going to plant it by yourself, you need to understand that you have to plant it on contour, which
Mm,
means you have to make sure that you're running it horizontally, um, at the same level all the way around the site to kind of create these different barriers as you go
mm,
up the site, and it helps to slow down water a lot
okay.
when you do that,
All right. As
right?
the architect, is that something that you would advise clients as to where to plant? I know you said after you know where the
Well,
construction is.
yeah. Once the design is so so these things are all being considered during the design
Mhm.
process,
Right.
right? Whether in the background or mostly in the background,
Hmm.
because most people are focused on the actual house. So
Exactly.
we are considering, okay, what can we do
Hmm.
holistically to kind of make sure that this works.
Right.
So yeah, we're thinking about where these things could go, and then we have landscapers we work with that we also keep in the loop of what's going on to say, okay, what do you think about this? What can we do in this area? What can we do in that area
Hmm.
to kind of create a
Okay.
natural retention system, as well as
Right.
for
For
the
beautification.
beautification. Yeah.
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 So the client shouldn't, if you're planting on a hill, if you're building on a hillside, sorry, the client
Mhm.
shouldn't expect concrete and more concrete. We want to use greenery to keep the land secure
Well,
more or less.
in Trinidad, if you're not supposed to cover more than 65% of your site with
Oh,
building
okay.
building and pavings,
All right.
right? You're supposed to at least have 35% for green. Now, it also depends on the site and where you are. So once you go for your
Right.
outline planning application, they'll tell you the proportions that you need to obey
All
if
right.
you if you
Okay,
if
fair
you
enough.
choose to. All right. So number 9, plan your services efficiently. So services in a building are your plumbing, electrical, and your mechanical, your ACs. Now, I mean, for electrical, this works for hillside as well as flatland. You need to make sure that your main panels are as close to where the electrical comes in as you can, as possible, because that main cable is very expensive. So the further away from the supply you put it, the more line you need. It's going to be very expensive. Um, you're keeping your plumbing stacked is also a very good thing to do, and making sure that your plumbing is not penetrating any retaining structures, right? And well, with regards to mechanical, that's kind of like dependent. I mean, um, I guess if someone is putting in a central AC unit, they're probably not really concerned about cost. Right? But if you're using your regular split units, you just need to, just be wary about accessing for servicing, right? And sorry, here we are. Is there a preferred method for sewage waste water disposal when building on a slope? Um, Well, what in Trinidad, what usually the WASA usually guides you on what they will approve. So we've used septic tank with filter trenches. We've used septic tanks with soakaways. Um, of course, your regular main sewer. But it all depends. It all depends on your specific situation. Right? Does that answer your question? Kiva?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That terminology that you use, that's like the equivalent maker or
The equivalent of the filter trench?
NWC. You said
Yeah.
pump.
NWC. Yeah. NWC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the same thing.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. All right. So number 10, which is pretty much the best thing you could do is, build in phases. So you could, on a hillside, you could imagine you build, you stabilize first and you build the structure, then you finish it. That will help with cash flow and it reduces rework. Now, I mean, when I say reduces rework, I use that loosely because the longer you take to build something, the more room you have to change your mind about what you're doing. But at least you're deferring some costs and you help with your cash flow. So you don't need to build everything at once, just build smart, not fast. Right? So main takeaway here. So just a recap, we're looking at, we step in with the slope, we're limiting the retaining walls as much as we can. Limiting, not just saying we're not building a retaining wall, but we're limiting maybe your size of your retaining wall by working with the land, right? Use easy access. Figure out the easiest way to access this site that you can live with, right? Simplify the structure as much as you can. Don't get too crazy with cantilevers and going. I mean, I've seen somebody share a plan with me once where they had these massive columns coming up probably like 7 meters just to create a flat section, just to create a flat slab against the road. Now, just those columns alone is going to be half your budget, right? Go lightweight. It's a great option. But again, if you're using lightweight material like steel next to the seaside, then you need to consider how you're protecting that steel. Plan your drainage early. Make sure as you're developing the site, the contractor you're working with is also thinking about how they're controlling the water. Keep your vegetation if you can, or plant as you build. Cluster your services. Make sure things are not penetrating retaining walls or they're kind of in the same location, and phase your build. Right? So these aren't just cost saving, they create a better hillside home when you think about these different points. Right? So if anybody's interested, I'll invite you guys to, if you have a hillside project that you're thinking about and you want some advice, you could always book a virtual consultation with us. And we could talk about your vision, what you're looking to do, where you're planning to do it. We could look at, maybe see how what you're planning match up to some of these tips and see how we could guide you that way. Right? Anybody have any further questions?
Yes, if nobody else has any questions, wanted to ask something else. In terms of, again, if it is that you have a client who has never built on a hillside before, and you have your virtual consultation where they will be essentially telling you what their plans are, but you haven't seen the hill, you haven't seen the site as yet. During that clarity report where you go and do the site visits and you provide a clarity report, I could
Mm-hmm.
see how that would be beneficial because what I'm thinking for my site might be very different from what the site could actually do based upon this
Yes.
presentation. So could you give
Yes.
us a little bit of information about your site visits and clarity reports and how that
Right.
ties in?
Right. So the process we use, we try to have a simple process to get people to kind of, so the virtual consultation is really about high level, thinking about your vision, trying to figure out, what exactly you want to achieve. And from that, then we offer a clarity report. And with the clarity report, we do a site visit, we document the site, look at your slope, look at your utilities, look at how the wind, sun, um, soil type. And we also sit with you and really kind of like get we develop a brief. We get exactly what your requirements are in the clarity report. So the virtual consultation is high level, seeing how we vibe, seeing if we are a good fit. And once we feel good about each other, then we could do the clarity report, which is usually a paid service. And sorry, I'm seeing another question coming in here, but let me just finish this. And with the clarity report, it basically does what it says, clarity. So we take all your requirements and we translate it into a document which anybody could then take. And if you want to work with us, you work with us. If you want to work with somebody else, you have a tool to explain exactly what you want to that other person
Right.
to avoid confusion,
Fair
right?
enough.
And in our clarity
During, go ahead.
in our clarity report, we also kind of give an idea as to what a possible solution could be in a very
Right.
in sketch form.
Yeah, right. So that's what I was going to ask in terms of knowing what the land could do. That's where the clarity report comes in there, so that you wouldn't be building and hoping that it could work, and then in the middle of construction, you're like, we can't do that anymore, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, right. All right. So there's another question here. You want to jump off mute and tell us, Suze?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. No, this was really in regards to, I mean, maybe you just provided a little more clarity just now with that response. It was more so about your consultation. So I'm assuming this now works with the clarity report that you just answered.
Right.
But I was just wondering if it's your specialty is mainly hillside, because the reason why I signed up for this today specifically is because the land is not yet clear. There's a lot of massive trees, a lot of vegetation, which we're clearing before the end of the year. But there is a lot of natural slope to it. It's going to be the plan for it as a residential home, so sprawl. But I do want to. I'm in the market for someone who is going to work with the slope of the land. That's what I'm getting at. So I was
Right.
just wondering if this is something that you also do, is it strictly hillsides and more dramatic slopes that you work with?
We could have a virtual consultation and we have a chat and see what your vision is and see
Right.
if there's something we can help you with or point you in the right direction.
Okay. Okay. No problem.
All
Well,
right. So we could send you the link through and you could book a virtual consultation with us.
yeah, I got it. I think someone posted it earlier. So yes, thank you so much. Okay,
Excellent.
great.
All right. Cool. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I want to thank you all for joining me. I really enjoyed this one. And as I said, just build, if you're building, try to really take notes or take all your guidance from your site. That will usually lead you in the right direction. So I look forward to seeing you guys at the next one. And till then, thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye.